Elon Musk has purchased Twitter. That went through yesterday. There's a PR newswire that went out about the final transaction. The board accepted the price, $5 or $54.20, with a nice little reference in there. A lot of people did not think this was going to happen, and now the Wall Street Journal has put out a great piece summarizing the information that we have so far about what Elon did when he pulled this off. Essentially, Wall Street Journal goes into this and they say, like, at first the board wasn't thinking that this was going to happen. He had tweeted out the SEC filing about perhaps purchasing Twitter. No one knew if this was real or not. And then he quickly assembled all the capital that he needed to be able to do this, including taking out a bunch of margin loans on his Tesla stock, which is actually pretty risky to be able to do something like that. He also got a lot of support from a lot of big bankers who backed up what he's saying. His financial advisors backed up the price for which he was willing to purchase it for, and Twitter had no option but to purchase it. And now what we're seeing on Twitter is a bunch of people getting called out for saying this would never happen. Just tons of little clips of people being like, oh, Twitter will never accept this offer, but it happened. Adam, I'm going to throw it over to you for your take.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting move, honestly. You know, there was a lot of skepticism about the kind of willingness to accept this deal. I think in the end, Elon played it pretty well, and they kind of had no choice but to accept it. Otherwise, they would have exposed themselves to pretty significant liability. You know, when you're talking about the kind of board of directors of a publicly traded company, you're talking about people whose job it is to look after the best fiduciary, you know, to be fiduciaries on behalf of the actual people who own the equity, who are the people who actually own the company. And so one thing that was called out interestingly in the kind of earlier parts of this saga is that with Jack Dorsey leaving the board when his term ends, there really would be no significant holdings of equity in the company represented on the board. And so it set up this kind of interesting thing where Musk has been very clear from the word go that he doesn't actually like the board and doesn't intend to retain the board. And so these are people who are well paid in their current positions and who frankly have a lot of power as a result of those positions. And they gain almost nothing from losing their jobs through this acquisition, given that they don't own much stock and they weren't going to be retained. So certainly they didn't want to accept it, but they were kind of trapped into it because otherwise, as I mentioned, they exposed themselves to liability. So I think that it's actually a really good move. I'm really happy to see that it's happening. And I'm happy to see that this isn't being dragged out, because there were questions about sort of the political nature of the board in terms of the way that they've done some of the way that the company as a whole has sort of purported itself over the last number of years, killing a number of stories that seemed like they were kind of partisan choices. So I'm happy to see this happen. Now, whether or not this is actually an improvement in terms of what we're going to get out of Twitter, you know, I mean, I've had a Twitter account for going on 10 years now, I guess a little bit longer than that, actually. And I haven't used the platform much for really 5 or 6 years at this point, because it just has felt increasingly like a liability to do so. I don't think that's going to change under Elon Musk. I think that it might get to be a messier place. But ultimately, again, like, I think what we're really looking for in institutions these days is institutions that don't pick sides in the increasingly politicized world that we sort of live in today. And so if all he does is just pull that back and make it so that the platform is neutral, you know, still reprehensible in lots of different ways, hosting lots of terrible opinions. But if he pulls it back towards that kind of more neutral, everybody can be terrible at the same time sort of path, then I think that there might actually be something here, and it might wind up being a good decision. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, he's the CEO of Tesla, he's the CEO of SpaceX, he's the owner of the Boring Company, the owner of Neuralink. I just wonder how he's going to split his time and how he's going to focus his energies. You know, I'm interested to see, we've spoken a lot about what's already happened to get here. I'm interested to see what's going to happen moving forward and how Twitter's business model is going to change. 90% of Twitter's revenue comes from advertising. And if Elon starts making decisions on these really polarizing topics, I wonder how many advertisers are going to stay around on platform. And then to your point about the board, I wonder how many Twitter employees are going to hang around. You know, I think there's maybe going to be an internal shakeup at Twitter. There's going to be a shakeup with advertising if that business model changes. And I wonder how prepared Elon is for that and how stretched he is already. We talk about him funding this new venture. He's taking out a lot of debt, so I would imagine he has to keep that business model. He's accountable to the people who have issued this debt. So there are a few things I think that we are going to see play out that will be interesting to watch as we move forward. But Will, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, we have to finish off the conversation by talking about Jack Dorsey's tweets last night about the whole situation. He said, quote, "In principle, I don't believe anyone should own or run Twitter. It wants to be a public good at a protocol level, not a company. Solving for the problem of it being a company, however, Elon is the singular solution I trust. I trust his mission to extend the light of consciousness." So pretty esoteric tweet there, which is pretty on brand for Jack Dorsey as well. But I think it has sparked some like rumors, and some people are out there thinking, what's going on? Like, was this planned months ago? Did Jack Dorsey step down from Twitter with the intention of Elon taking over at some point? Is Jack coming back? Is he coming back, baby? Like, that would be pretty awesome, wouldn't it? That would be pretty great. That would be like, talk about a comeback story. That would be pretty sick. So, I don't think this is over. In fact, I dare say we are in the beginning innings here, just teeing it off right now. We got much more to see.
I love it. Adam, I think I saw your hand go up before we move over to the next topic.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the thing that I'm watching with all of this, that comment from Jack Dorsey is interesting because I actually think I agree with that. I think that again, like the platform as a whole, these platforms that are privately controlled, but which we conduct so much of our life on, when he talks about them being digital commons, what he's really talking about is he's talking about neutral spaces on the internet for people to express themselves. And the reason why we use platforms like Twitter, like Facebook, et cetera, is because once you build network effect on one of these platforms, it's really, really hard to build something new that displaces it. It's kind of their game to lose. And so the idea that this could become that, and he actually mentioned as a protocol, and the word protocol harkens back to Twitter's Blue Sky project, which has been long promised and never actually rolled out. So, this sort of dynamic of having billionaires that come in and buy media companies, a lot of times I don't like it because the billionaires, again, they tend to abuse their privileges here. Jen, to your point, the way that Elon's going to scale this is he's going to hire people. And if he hires the right people, then those people will be people who have that sort of global commons, neutrality type of viewpoint along with it. And that's very different than the company is right now. So as kind of all of this goes through, I completely agree with you, Will. This is the kind of beginning of a much longer story. And it will be very interesting as we come up to the midterm elections, I think. That's something that hasn't been discussed a lot, but it actually plays in hugely here because Twitter played a large role in the last election too, especially with the censoring of the Hunter Biden story, which has now been sort of acknowledged as actually being true, despite the way that it was treated sort of at a very critical time. So a very, very interesting story. Interesting to see what Musk is going to do. But the nice part about billionaires is that they don't care about money. And, Jen, to your point, with regards to, like he's taken out loans against this, he's taken out loans against his shares of Tesla equity, which is where he holds most of his money, which is actually a very kind of intelligent way to do this because it means that he doesn't have to sell his equity unless the loans actually go bad. And in the lead up to that, it means that he doesn't have to pay taxes in order to do this acquisition that is certainly going to be a feather in his cap, I think, no matter what winds up happening.